Welcome back. Find a comfortable position and let your body get heavy. Take a slow breath in and let it out. There's nothing you need to do right now. Know where you need to be. Tonight, I have 5 stories for you. Let them wash over you. You don't need to follow along closely. Just let the words carry you. Let's begin. I remember an overcast afternoon, the kind that often felt heavy yet comforting. I stood in my small kitchen, where the warm glow of a single light bulb cast a gentle circle on the worn white tiles. The air was still, tinged with the earthy scent of rosemary from a pot on the windowsill. The window was slightly ajar, allowing a cool breeze to flutter through and ruffle the curtains, which swayed lazily, almost as if they were breathing in tandem with me. Outside, the world felt muted, as if painted in shades of gray and soft pastels, with raindrops beginning to splatter against the glass, each one a tiny, momentary burst of sound. I had just brewed a pot of chamomile tea, its delicate aroma curling upwards in gentle wisps, mingling with the herbal notes of the rosemary. As I poured the steaming liquid into my favorite chipped ceramic mug, a pale blue with a subtle crack running through it, like a small scar that told stories of its own, I felt an unfamiliar weight settle in my chest. It had been a week now since I made a decision that seemed small at the time, but echoed loudly in the quiet corners of my mind. A choice that, on the surface, was nothing more than an adjustment to my routine. I had decided to step away from my position at work. The mug warmed my hands as I cradled it, feeling the heat seep through the ceramic. I had spent so many mornings in this kitchen, contemplating the day ahead, but this time felt different. I took a sip of the tea, the floral flavors unfolding softly on my tongue. It was soothing, and I closed my eyes, allowing myself a moment to be fully present there, just as the rain drizzled down like a gentle lullaby. That week had been filled with conversations and quiet moments of reflection. I remembered the day I'd spoken with Jenna, my closest friend. I could still see her leaning back against the faded blue couch in her living room, the light filtering through the sheer curtains, and lending a golden glow to her hair as she listened intently. We had been discussing my dissatisfaction with work, the feeling of being a cog in a machine that was continually whirring and shifting without notice. She'd raised an eyebrow at me, a playful glint in her eye as she said, "Maybe it's not about finding the next big thing. Maybe it's about finding the quiet things that bring you joy." No. No. Her words had lingered in the air like the fading notes of a song, and I found myself considering them. I hadn't realized how much I had allowed my routine to dictate my happiness, how the constant rush of deadlines and meetings had drowned out the softer, more meaningful parts of my life. That evening, as I returned home, I felt the weight of the decision pressing upon me, but it also filled me with an unexpected lightness, a sense of possibility that I hadn't felt in a while. Now, standing in my kitchen, I thought of the conversations with colleagues, the uncertain glances exchanged when I announced my choice. There were supportive nods from a few, the hesitant smiles from others, and the weight of opinions that lingered like shadows on the edges of my thought. Yet, I concluded, it was my life, and with every sip of chamomile, I felt that weight gently lift. Perhaps stepping away wouldn't just mean leaving something behind. It might mean opening up to a more vibrant canvas, one I could fill with the colors of my choosing. The rain began to patter more insistently against the window, the soft rhythm creating a cocoon around me. I took my tea over to the small dining table, its surface scratched and marked from years of shared meals and quiet mornings. I slid into the chair, feeling the familiar creaks and sighs that were the table's way of welcoming me. I rested my elbows on the table, cradling the mug close to my chin, and allowed my gaze to wander around the room. The walls were lined with a collage of memories. Photos of hikes and laughter, reminders of friends who had shared their smiles in this space. A handful of postcards from someone who had traveled to far-off lands. Each piece whispered a story of joy and connection. I couldn't help but smile, a soft tug at the corners of my lips. It was in this cozy refuge that I realized the power of simplicity. The decision to leave my job had opened up a sacred space in my life, a moment in which I could take a breath without the pressure of expectation. I felt a flicker of excitement at the thought of what might come next. Perhaps some long-forgotten hobbies would be given room to blossom once more. I hadn't painted in ages, and the idea of splashing colors on canvas made my heart warm, the very thought igniting a spark of inspiration. The rain eased into a gentle drizzle, and I pulled a small sketchbook from the shelf nearby, its pages blank and inviting. As I flipped open to the first page, I caught a glimpse of the sunset from a few evenings prior. The sky a riot of oranges and pinks melting into deep indigo. I began to doodle loosely, trailing my pencil across the page with long, flowing strokes. Each line seemed to carry away my worries, sweeping them off to the edges of the universe, leaving behind only the uncomplicated joy of creation. With each moment, I filled the page, losing myself in the act of drawing rather than focusing on the end result. I listened to the soft thrum of rain outside, the gentle tapping harmonizing with my own quiet thoughts. I felt liberated, like a balloon tethered by a single string that had finally come loose, floating upward into the vast expanse of the sky. The world outside faded away, and I was left in this little pocket of time where all that mattered was the connection between my heart, the sketchbook, and the soothing cadence of the rain. Hours seemed to slip by like whispers, and as the day began to yield to twilight, the kitchen was bathed in the soft glow of the fading light. I glanced outside, where the rain had begun to wane, leaving droplets clinging to the leaves outside like diamonds. I found peace in that simple observation, recognizing the beauty in life's quiet moments. Swallowing my last sip of chamomile, I smiled to myself, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. With a deep breath, I put down my pencil and closed the sketchbook, grateful for this time of reflection. The decision I had made was a step toward something new, and in that moment it felt right, no longer a weight, but a gentle guiding force. I rinsed my mug, placing it back on the drying rack with care, then turned off the kitchen light, allowing the shadows to dance lightly against the walls as I made my way to the living room. Curling up on the couch, surrounded by the remnants of a day well spent, I felt the soft embrace of a blanket wrap around me. I tucked it under my chin and allowed my eyelids to flutter shut. The world outside was dimming, the soft patter of the remaining rain, a comforting lullaby. As I nestled deeper into the cushions, I savored the stillness of the moment, whispering a silent wish for what lay ahead, welcoming the gentle embrace of sleep into my heart. The day felt like a breath let out, and I welcomed the night with open arms, ready to drift into dreams. Let yourself relax as we begin the next story. The morning light slipped gently through the lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the worn wooden kitchen table. I sat there, wrapped in the comforting embrace of an oversized sweater, the kind that felt like a warm hug on chilly mornings. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, mingling with the faint, sweet scent of cinnamon from the apple pie cooling on the counter. I could hear the soft patter of rain against the window, a steady rhythm that felt like nature's lullaby, coaxing the world outside into a slower pace. I glanced out, where the streets glistened under the light drizzle. Tiny rivulets of water danced down the glass, racing each other to the edge. A distant car splashed through a puddle, sending a small spray of water glittering into the air. It was the sort of morning that invited one to linger, to savor the quiet moments. I wrapped my hands around my mug, feeling the warmth seep into my palms, and took a slow sip, careful not to burn my tongue on the first taste. Today was the kind of day that felt right for wandering, so I decided to take a stroll through the nearby park that had always brought me peace. After soaking in the last sweet sip of coffee, I slipped on my rain jacket and laced up my scuffed sneakers. The muted sound of my footsteps was comforting against the soft grass as I made my way to the park, where I imagined the world would be slightly misty, softened by the rain. The park was nearly empty, save for a few determined souls who braved the light drizzle. An elderly man walking his golden retriever, a couple huddled under a bright umbrella, and a lone jogger, whose rhythmic strides created a quiet backdrop to my thoughts. I wandered along the path, admiring the way the raindrops clung to the vibrant leaves, each droplet a tiny world all its own. The air felt fresh and cool against my skin, and with every breath, I could taste the promise of spring hidden beneath the clouds. As I reached a small clearing, I spotted a bench that overlooked a pond. The water's surface rippled gently, creating a mesmerizing pattern that drew me in. I settled onto the weathered wood, feeling the coolness seep into the fabric of my pants as I sat, breathing deeply and letting the tranquility surround me. This was my favorite spot, a little oasis where the bustling world melted away, where I could reflect on the little things that brought me joy. As I sat there, a soft rustling broke through the gentle sound of rain. I turned to see a woman, perhaps in her late 60s, with a kind smile and a shock of silver hair tucked neatly behind her ears. She wore a bright yellow raincoat that stood out like a sunbeam on this cloudy day. She approached my bench with a small, unassuming basket cradled in her arms. "Hello there," she said, her voice warm and inviting. "Mind if I join you?" I smiled and offered a nod, shifting to make a little more room on the bench. "Of course." She settled beside me, carefully placing her basket on her lap. It was woven, with a charmingly uneven handle, and I could see something wrapped in a soft cloth peeking out from inside. The woman looked out at the pond, her gaze serene, and for a moment we shared a comfortable silence, punctuated only by the soft patter of rain and the occasional call of a bird flitting through the branches. "I come here every Wednesday," she said finally, breaking the quiet. "It's my little tradition, rain or shine. Today, I brought some treats to share. Would you like one?" "Nee." Her generosity took me by surprise. "Oh, you don't have to," I replied, caught slightly off guard by the unexpected kindness. "Nonsense," she laughed, a gentle sound like the tinkling of wind chimes. "I always say that sharing food can brighten even the dullest day. Here, how?" She reached into her basket and pulled out a small plate, revealing an assortment of cookies, each more enticing than the last. There were chocolate chip, oatmeal raisin, and a delightful-looking almond biscotti. I couldn't help but smile, feeling a warmth spreading in my chest. "Those look delicious." "Thank you," I said, taking a bite of the chocolate chip cookie. The cookie was soft, with gooey chocolate that melted on my tongue. It tasted like a hug from a friend. "I'm Clara, by the way," she said, her eyes twinkling as she watched me enjoy the treat. "I'm Alex," I replied, a little shyly. "It's nice to meet you." We fell into an easy conversation, sharing stories of our favorite places in the park, our favorite books, and the little things that made us smile. Clara spoke with a kind of warmth that felt like sunshine breaking through a cloudy day. She told me about her grandchildren who lived far away and how she missed them, but every Wednesday she came to the park as a way to feel connected to them, as if the memories of their laughter lingered in the air. As we talked and laughed, the rain continued to fall softly around us, creating a cocoon of warmth and comfort. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so at ease with a stranger. There was something almost magical about it, the connection that blossomed in the simplicity of shared cookies and quiet conversation beneath the steady beat of the rain. Time drifted by, whether we talked about the best types of chocolate or whether squirrels had a secret club, I couldn't tell. I simply enjoyed being there, sharing that space with someone who understood the beauty of the moment. It felt as if the world outside had faded away, leaving just the two of us and the soft sound of nature wrapping around us like a cozy blanket. Then, as if pulling a thread, I noticed the rain was letting up, softening to a gentle drizzle. The clouds began to part slightly, revealing patches of blue sky, hinting at a brighter day ahead. The air felt lighter, and the sense of fresh earth and blooming flowers wafted around, invigorating my senses. Clara glanced up, her eyes brightening at the sight. "Looks like we might have a break in the weather," she said, her smile contagious. "Just in time for me to pack up and head home, I suppose." I felt a tinge of sadness at the thought of our time together coming to an end. "I wish we could sit here longer," I admitted, hoping my voice didn't betray the reluctance I felt. "Every moment has its own rhythm," she replied, looking at me with a knowing expression. "But it's the memories we create that linger on. And I'll certainly remember this lovely morning. Perhaps we'll meet again next Wednesday." "None." "I'd like that," I said, a smile creeping onto my face, a warmth settling deeper in my heart. With a soft rustle, Clara stood up, carefully lifting her basket as if it contained precious treasures. "Take care, Alex," she said, her voice soothing. "Remember to always find a moment to share a snack and a smile. The world needs more of both." "No, man, yeah." With that, she turned and walked away, her bright yellow raincoat a cheerful beacon against the now brightening landscape. I sat for a moment longer, letting the weight of the morning settle upon me, feeling grateful for the unexpected kindness of a stranger. Her warmth lingered in the air, a reminder of the connections we find even in the simplest of moments. As I rose to head home, I felt a renewed sense of peace and connection to the world around me. The light of the day warmed my face, the sweet taste of the cookies still fresh on my tongue, and the knowledge that I could carry this small encounter with me, a little treasure tucked in my heart. And as I walked back through the park, I took note of the shimmering droplets of water that clung to the flowers, sparkling like tiny jewels in the sunlight. I welcomed the gentle breeze that whispered through the trees, a promise of more bright days to come. When I finally stepped back into my cozy kitchen, the rain had ceased, and the world felt a little brighter, a little kinder. I set my wet shoes by the door, slipping back into the warmth of my home. I could still taste the sweetness of the cookies, and I smiled at the thought of sharing them with a friend. I pulled my chair closer to the table, noticing the soft morning light made everything glow gently. It felt like a promise, a contented sigh that drifted through the air. I took a moment to settle down, breathing in the stillness, feeling gratitude wash over me like a warm wave. As the evening began to brush the sky with shades of soft pink and orange, I listened to the gentle sounds of the world outside, lulled by the calming rhythm of the day winding down. I had turned off the kitchen light, my heart full, and nestled into my favorite corner of the couch, allowing the warmth of my blanket to envelop me. And as I let my eyes flutter closed, I held on to the memory of a bright yellow raincoat, a shared cookie, and the kindness that we all carry, waiting to be shared. And now, our next story. There was a certain magic to the evenings in that little town, the kind that made every detail seem larger than life. The air carried a faint hint of wood smoke mixed with the sweet scent of lilacs from the neighbors' gardens, blooming resolutely despite the encroaching chill of autumn. I could hear the chirping of crickets as they filled the twilight with their gentle symphony, while the sky turned a deep, dusky blue, pinpricked with stars beginning to twinkle. I sat on my porch, a sturdy wicker chair creaking softly beneath me, wrapped in a warm knitted sweater that enveloped me like a hug. The not too hot, not too cold evening was perfect for a cup of chamomile tea, steam curling up from the mug in delicate wisps. The world settled into a comfortable rhythm, a hum of life unfolding around me. I glanced over at the neighbor's yard. Mr. B. Thompson, with his meticulous garden, where every petal seemed to know its place. I smiled to myself, recalling my many visits to his home while growing up, where I had watched him share tales of his garden, each story more colorful than the last. But as I sipped my tea, my mind ventured back to a small and rather amusing incident from last spring, one that had faded with the seasons, but remained a quiet flicker in the back of my memory. You see, back then, Mr. Thompson had been trying his hand at growing the perfect tomatoes, the prize-winning variety. He doted on them like a parent on a child, hovering over them, adjusting their stakes, and even talking to them, as if coaxing them to ripen faster. I'd chuckled at his enthusiasm, recalling my own childhood where I had been similarly captivated by the idea of growing something from seed. In my own little patch, I attempted to grow sunflowers, but they had turned out more like scraggly weeds, and I'd conceded defeat with a laugh and a sigh. It was during this time that my mischievous side caught wind of a little rivalry brewing between Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Mullen Jenkins next door. Mrs. Jenkins had a fondness for gardening as well, though her passion extended to her vibrant array of flowers rather than vegetables. The two of them would exchange half-serious jabs over whose garden was the best, each trying to outshine the other in their own little way. There was something undeniably charming about their banter, and I felt a nostalgic tug to be part of it. One sunny afternoon, as I wandered through the neighborhood, I spotted a vibrant display of ripe tomatoes at the local farmer's market. They glistened like rubies, practically begging to be taken home. An idea, slightly cheeky, began to unfurl in my mind. What if I borrowed some of that tomato glory for my dear Mr. Thompson? Just a playful little gesture, a harmless prank to add to the friendly competition. I imagined Mrs. Jenkins' delight, Mr. Thompson's playful indignation, and a chuckle that would ripple through our little community. So, I made my purchase and secured them gently in a bag, already grinning at my own cleverness. As dusk began to settle, I slipped quietly into Mr. Thompson's garden, my heart racing playfully in my chest. I carefully arranged the tomatoes among the ripe green foliage, nestling them beneath the leaves, as if they were a part of his hard-earned harvest. If he stumbled upon them, it would surely elicit that hearty laugh of his, the one that seemed to bounce off the stars. The next evening, I had the sheer pleasure of observing from a distance as Mr. Thompson meandered into his garden. My heart danced with glee as he paused, blinking in disbelief at the sight of those immaculate tomatoes, watching as he picked them delicately, cradling each one as though he had discovered a hidden treasure. I could have sworn I saw a gleam of pride in his eye, mistaking them for the fruits of his labor. Oh, look at these beauties. I must have done something right after all, he exclaimed, his voice booming through the quiet evening. I stifled a giggle behind the porch railing, my heart swelling with warmth at his delight. Mrs. Jenkins caught wind of his newfound bounty the very next day, and it was not long before she marched over, her floral-patterned dress swaying with each determined step. I could hear snippets of their conversation wafting up to me like the sweet scent of blooming flowers. "Those tomatoes are magnificent, Thompson. What's your secret?" she teased, a playful edge to her tone. I could only imagine the triumphant smile on Mr. Thompson's face as he launched into an exaggerated tale of care and diligence. I leaned back, sipping my chamomile, my heart feeling fuller with each passing day. There was something so tender about seeing joy ripple through their banter, the camaraderie that arose from simple pleasures, a rivalry wrapped in kindness. Time went on, and of course, it was only a matter of days before Mr. Thompson realized the truth behind those glorious tomatoes. I can still picture it. The moment his brow crinkled in confusion, the laughter that erupted when he figured out that they weren't his at all. His laughter rang out like a melody in the night air, brightening the corners of our streets. In the end, our neighborhood was woven with the echoes of their kindly rivalry. I had never intended for it to go on for so long, but somewhere along the line, it transformed into something tender, a bond that brought us all together like a cozy quilt of shared moments and laughter. As autumn settled in, the air crisp and fragrant, it felt as though Mr. Thompson and Mrs. Jenkins had joined forces rather than remain rivals. They shared tips and tended to their gardens, occasionally inviting me over for a cup of tea and perhaps a slice of Mrs. Jenkins' famous zucchini bread, so perfectly spiced that it seemed to melt away any hint of chill. I remember one afternoon when Mr. Thompson brought over a basket of tomatoes from his garden, his own this time, with a cheeky grin. Guess I finally learned the secret. The warmth of those memories washed over me as I wrapped up my tea and let the last sip settle in my belly. On that peaceful evening, as the stars twinkled overhead and the crickets sang their lullaby, I found comfort in the gentle rhythm of everyday life. I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply the sweet scents surrounding me, and let the world fade away, knowing that laughter and kindness had woven us all together in a tapestry of shared stories. Eventually, as the light faded, I took one last breath and let it out slowly, surrendering to the peacefulness around me. I savored the warmth of my home, the soft glow from the porch light casting a golden hue over the garden, and felt gratitude swell in my heart. It was just another evening in our little town, where the air was sweet and the laughter lingered like a cherished memory. I settled back, wrapped in the comfort of the night, and let the world drift away. And now, our next story. I remember the faint sound of rain tapping against the window as I sat in my little kitchen, the air warm with the scent of freshly baked bread. It was one of those mornings when the world outside felt soft and muted, the gray curtains surrendering a gentle light that bathed the room in a cozy hush. I had just pulled the bread from the oven, its crust crackling as it cooled on the wooden counter, and steam rose in delicate wisps. The kitchen was my sanctuary, filled with mismatched mugs and a floral-patterned tablecloth that had seen better days. It always made me smile, a little slice of home that welcomed me each time I stepped inside. As I sliced into the warm loaf, the comforting aroma enveloped me, and I couldn't help but feel a sense of tranquility. I hummed softly to myself, the tune a familiar one that had slipped through my mind on mornings like this. Outside, raindrops glided down the window in uneven trails, resembling tiny rivers that sparkled when they caught the light. I could hear the distant chatter of birds awakening from their slumber, their songs a gentle reminder that the world was alive, even on a dreary day. It wasn't long before my friend Clara arrived, her hair pulled back in a loose bun, a bright yellow raincoat shielding her from the elements. She burst through the door, shaking off droplets like a cat might after coming in from the rain. "You weren't kidding about the bread," she said, her eyes widening at the sight of the golden crust. "It looks amazing." I felt a rush of warmth at her excitement, always appreciating how she could make the simplest things feel like a grand occasion. "Want a slice?" I offered, and she nodded emphatically, plopping down at the little kitchen table, settling into one of the rickety chairs that creaked whenever we shifted our weight. The kettle began to whistle, and I made my way to pour water into a teapot. Our favorite chamomile was tucked away in the cupboard, the packets decorated with cheerful daisies that seemed to laugh at the rain. We shared a comfortable silence as I prepared the tea, the sound of water bubbling a gentle companion to the soft patter of rain outside. I returned with 2 steaming cups, the fragrant tea swirling with hints of honey. As I handed a cup to Clara, her eyes sparkled with gratitude, and I felt a small swell of happiness, knowing we could share moments like this together. "You know," she said, her voice softening, "I've been meaning to tell you about this little mix-up I had yesterday." I leaned in, intrigued, and took a sip of my tea, letting the warmth spread through me. Clara had a talent for turning the mundane into something entertaining. She paused, her lips curling into a grin. "So, I was at the grocery store, right? And I was looking for some fresh basil for that pasta dish I wanted to impress you with next week. You know how much I love cooking for you," she said, and I chuckled, recalling the last culinary adventure we'd embarked on, nearly setting off the smoke alarm. "Anyway," she continued, "I was standing in front of the herbs, feeling like I was on a mission. But I was a bit distracted, thinking about a recipe for an Italian feast, and I ended up grabbing what I thought was basil. But when I got home and opened the packet..." "Nom, oh no." Her laughter filled the room, bright and infectious as I leaned closer, waiting for the punchline. "Turns out I had a whole packet of mint instead," she exclaimed, slapping her knee in delight. I had visions of spaghetti with an overwhelming mint flavor. Can you imagine? I could practically hear the pasta screaming, "What have you done to me?" I laughed heartily, picturing her confusion as she stared at the vibrant green leaves in disbelief. I can just see you trying to explain that to your taste buds, I teased gently. A new culinary trend, perhaps? Mint pasta. No, Lani. She laughed again, shaking her head as she took a sip of her tea. Honestly, I thought about it. But then I remembered that you're probably coming over this week, and I wouldn't want you to think I'd lost my cooking touch. No, Anani. The conversation flowed easily, a gentle current of friendship that wrapped around us like a warm blanket. We shared stories about kitchen disasters and triumphs, our laughter mixing with the rhythmic pitter-patter of raindrops outside. The world beyond faded away as we settled comfortably into our familiar rhythm, and I felt the kind of contentment that settles deep within the bones. As I looked at Clara, her eyes crinkled with joy, I felt an unexpected warmth surge through me. It was like a balm, soothing and necessary in a world that often rushed past with no time to savor the small moments. We shared a quiet, knowing glance, and for a moment everything felt just right. I could almost hear the unwritten promise that every misstep was not really a misstep, just another laugh to be had. Eventually, Clara glanced at the clock, a playful frown forming on her face. I can't believe the time. I've got to tackle that mint pasta tonight, just to see if I can pull it off, she declared, the determination in her voice making me smile. But first, I should probably take a few minutes to swap those herbs for the right ones, or else my dinner guests might need a palate cleanse. I'm sure they'll think it's a bold choice, I said, chuckling softly. Everyone loves a little culinary adventure, right? It was true. We both knew how unpredictable cooking could be, and if nothing else, it made for great stories at the dinner table. I walked her to the door, the rhythmic sound of rain creating a soothing backdrop. Just before she stepped into the dance of droplets outside, she turned to me, her smile wide and genuine. Next time I'll bring you the mint and we'll make something fun. Who needs basil, anyway? Absolutely, I replied, closing the door behind her and returning to the cozy warmth of my kitchen. I leaned against the counter, the remnants of our conversation filling the room like the lingering scent of the bread. I could still hear her laughter echoing, like a favorite song that played softly on the radio. As I settled down at the kitchen table, my heart felt light. The rain continued to fall outside, the world outside my window painted in shades of gray. But inside, the atmosphere was vibrant with the memory of friendship and warmth. I picked up a slice of the still warm bread and took a bite, the crust giving way to the soft, fluffy interior. It was delightful, a simple pleasure that felt more profound in its familiarity. I took a moment to breathe deeply, absorbing the scent of the bread and the chamomile tea still steaming beside me. I felt grateful for the moments shared, the laughter, and the little mix-ups that colored everyday life. I watched as the rain danced on the window pane, each drop a tiny world of its own. The sound began to blend into a gentle lullaby, and the cozy kitchen enveloped me in a soft embrace. I let my thoughts drift, savoring the warmth of the memories we had created, knowing that everyday adventures awaited us in the future, with or without Basil. As I finished my slice of bread, the kitchen around me began to quiet. I could feel the day coming to a close, the dim light wrapping the room in a gentle hug. The rain continued its serenade, and I felt my eyelids grow heavy, the comforting afterglow of friendship lulling me toward sleep. The world outside faded, and I knew that tomorrow would bring more laughter, more stories, and perhaps a few culinary mishaps along the way. But for now, I simply let it all go, safe in the knowledge that everything was just as it should be. Let yourself relax as we begin the next story. The gentle hum of the overhead lights in the office created a soft backdrop to the quiet that enveloped the small break room. I remember how the smell of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the faint scent of burnt toast from the nearby cafeteria. It was a Tuesday morning, the kind that invites you to linger just a bit longer in the cozy cocoon of ordinary life. As the clouds draped the sky in a soft gray blanket, I could hear the distant sound of rain tapping against the window, each drop forming a gentle rhythm that felt like a lullaby. As I leaned against the cool countertop, cradling a steaming cup, I could see my reflection in the glossy surface. My hair was pulled back in a messy bun, and I wore my usual oversized sweater, the one I always turn to on these cooler mornings. The warmth of the coffee seeped into my palm, a small comfort in a world that sometimes felt a bit tangled. I watched as the raindrops traced their way down the glass, lost in thought about the day ahead, which, in all honesty, didn't promise to be remarkable. My colleagues drifted in and out, filling the small room with soft murmurs about deadlines and weekend plans. Emma, with her bright orange scarf, laughed softly at something. Kyle said, her laughter brightening the dull corners of the break room. I smiled at their playful banter, but deep down, I felt a familiar knot in my stomach as I thought about Miles, our manager. He had a knack for turning the atmosphere from lighthearted to tense with just a few harsh words. As I took another sip of my coffee, the bitter taste mingling with the warmth, I let my mind wander back to last week. There was a meeting, an all-hands meeting, the kind that no one particularly looked forward to. The air had been thick with a sense of foreboding as we gathered in the conference room, the fluorescent lights flickering slightly overhead. Miles had stood at the front, a clipboard in hand, ready to deliver his usual brand of news, which sometimes felt more like criticism than guidance. I remember sitting at the long table, surrounded by my colleagues, trying to maintain a brave face. But it was hard to shake off that feeling of inadequacy when Miles leveled his gaze at each of us, pointing out flaws in our recent project with the precision of an executioner wielding a finely sharpened blade. His words were sharp, cutting through any sense of teamwork we had built, leaving us feeling like a collection of individual failures rather than a united front. That afternoon, as I returned to my desk, the weight of the meeting lingered like a heavy fog. I could see Emma and Kyle hunched over their computers, their faces mirroring my own weariness. It was as if we were all navigating through a maze, looking for a way out, but the walls kept shifting. Yet, amid the cloud of frustration, an ember of rebellion began to spark within me. Days passed, filled with meetings punctuated by Miles' sharp remarks, and I noticed how my colleagues grew quieter, retreating into their shells. I would often catch Emma stealing glances at me, her eyes questioning but hopeful. One afternoon, after yet another arduous meeting, I decided to take a walk around the nearby park during lunch. The cool breeze brushed against my cheeks, and I took a moment to breathe, to let nature calm my racing thoughts. While wandering along the winding path, I spotted an old oak tree, its gnarled branches stretching out like welcoming arms. I leaned against its sturdy trunk, the rough bark grounding me as I let my mind drift. Suddenly, a thought bloomed, a way to address the tension, and it didn't have to be through confrontation. I envisioned creating a feedback system, a way for everyone to share their thoughts and experiences without fear of judgment. It felt like a small revolution wrapped in kindness, and I felt a thrill at the prospect that maybe it could soften the edges of our workplace atmosphere. Back at the office, I shared the idea with Emma and Kyle during our afternoon break. Their faces lit up with understanding, relief washing over them like a warm wave. We spent hours crafting an anonymous feedback form, ensuring that everyone could voice their thoughts without the fear of retaliation. As we created our plan, the heaviness in my heart began to lighten. The morning we decided to present the feedback system to Miles arrived, and I remember that deep breath before we entered the conference room, where dozens of eyes turned toward us. I spoke first, my voice steady but gentle, explaining our intentions with the system, framing it as a tool for improvement rather than a critique of leadership. The room was silent as I shared our vision, and I could feel the tension brewing, but I pressed on, inviting our colleagues to express their feelings. Miles listened, his brow furrowing as he observed the mixed expressions on the faces around him. I could see the flicker of surprise in his eyes, though it was quickly masked by his familiar bravado. He let out a few dismissive remarks about needing to maintain control, but the tide had changed. Emma, perhaps emboldened by the support we had been able to muster, asked how he would like to receive feedback. The question hung in the air, shimmering with potential. Watching Miles, I felt a sense of calm, knowing I had gathered my courage to speak up. Gradually, something shifted in that room. One by one, gentle voices emerged, sharing stories of small frustrations, needs for clarity, and desires to collaborate more openly. The air felt lighter as the collective sigh of relief echoed against the walls. By the end of the meeting, Miles surprisingly agreed to trial our feedback system, albeit with a few caveats. As we left the room, I could see that my colleagues were smiling, their heads held a little higher. The rain outside had softened into a gentle drizzle, and the sun's rays peeked through the clouds, illuminating the office in a warm glow. Those weeks turned into months, and the feedback system took root, blossoming into something beautiful. Conversations began to flow more freely, and even Miles transformed slowly. He started to embrace feedback himself, though sometimes it felt like a turtle peeking out of its shell, taking timid steps into the light. I remember standing at the sink in the break room one morning, washing my coffee cup, listening to the sound of laughter drifting in from the other side. Emma and Kyle were sharing a joke, their voices ringing with happiness. As I dried my hands on a paper towel, I felt a swell of warmth in my chest, recognizing the subtle shifts in our workplace culture. It wasn't about grand gestures or sweeping changes. Sometimes, just guiding a small flame could illuminate a room. As I stood there observing the comforting chaos of our small office, I realized that workplace justice didn't mean battling for the spotlight, but rather nurturing an environment where everyone felt valued. Together we had woven a tapestry of understanding, and with every shared cup of coffee, every soft laugh, the threads grew stronger. And so, as the rain continued its steady serenade on the window, I felt gratitude wash over me. I was home in this little world of ours, where kindness and creativity intertwined in the most unexpected ways. As I switched off the lamp that night, I closed my eyes, my spirit light with the knowledge that together we could navigate even the stormiest of days, finding calm amid the chaos. And that's the last story for tonight. You've traveled along to get here. Through 5 quiet worlds, 5 small lives, 5 gentle resolutions. Your breathing is slower now. Your body is heavy and warm. There's nothing left to think about. Just the quiet. Just the dark. Just rest. Good night.